Black boys in 1975 grew up learning skills that modern children have never touched. They fixed cars with their fathers, navigated neighborhoods without GPS, and handled conflict without calling adults. These weren't elective activities or enrichment programs. They were survival skills passed down through necessity, teaching boys how to be self-reliant in a world that wouldn't help them. By the time a black boy turned 12 in 1975, he could change a tire, throw a punch, read a bus schedule, and cook a meal. He knew how to earn money, avoid danger, and fix what broke. These skills weren't taught in classrooms. They were learned in driveways, on street corners, and in kitchens where grandmothers didn't have patience for helplessness. Today, many of these skills have disappeared. Technology replaced some. Changing times made others obsolete, and shifting parenting styles deemed a few too harsh for modern childhood. But something was lost when these skills stopped being passed down. A certain competence, a particular confidence, an understanding that you could handle whatever came your way, because you'd been taught how. These are the 10 skills every black boy learned in 1975 that most don't learn today. 1. How to change a tire. In 1975, black boys learned to change tires by age 10. Saturday mornings meant watching Daddy jack up the car, loosen lug nuts, swap the flat for the spare, and tighten everything back down. Then it was your turn. Practice until your hands knew the pattern without thinking. Fathers taught this because breaking down on the side of the road meant vulnerability. Calling a tow truck meant expense. Waiting for help meant danger, especially for black boys in certain neighborhoods where standing still too long attracted the wrong attention. Boys learned to feel when lug nuts were tight enough, to position the jack properly so the car wouldn't slip, to work fast because the shoulder wasn't safe. This wasn't just car maintenance. This was survival mechanics. Today, most boys have never changed a tire. They call roadside assistance, use apps, wait for professionals. Cars have run flat tires and warning systems. The skill feels obsolete, but something was lost. That self-reliance, that ability to solve problems with your hands, that confidence that came from knowing you wouldn't be stranded and helpless. Modern boys are more dependent, more vulnerable to circumstances their grandfathers would have handled in 15 minutes. 2. How to fight and when to walk away. In 1975, black boys learned to fight. Fathers taught them how to make a proper fist, where to aim, how to protect their face, how to take a hit without crumpling. But they also taught when not to fight, when to walk away, when to use words, when winning meant surviving to see tomorrow. If somebody puts hands on you, you fight back. But don't be stupid. If they got a weapon, you run. If it's 3 against 1, you run. Pride ain't worth dying over. Boys learn to read situations, who was bluffing, who was serious, who would stop when you fought back, who wouldn't stop until you were hurt. This wasn't about violence. This was about navigating a world where being unable to defend yourself meant being a permanent target. Uncles and older cousins sparred with boys in backyards, teaching them to absorb pain without showing it, to stay calm when adrenaline surged, to understand that sometimes fighting was survival. Today, schools have zero-tolerance policies. Parents teach conflict resolution and emotional regulation. Fighting is criminalized, and boys who defend themselves face the same punishment as aggressors. This is healthier in many ways: fewer injuries, less violence normalized, more emphasis on communication. But black boys today sometimes can't defend themselves physically when verbal de-escalation fails, when authorities won't protect them, when walking away isn't an option. 3. How to use public transportation. In 1975, black boys navigated city bus systems independently by age 8. They memorized routes, understood transfer points, carried exact change, and knew which stops were safe and which weren't. Mothers sent sons across town on buses with written instructions. Take the number 7 to 5th Street, transfer to the 22, get off at Market, walk 2 blocks north. Boys figured it out because they had to. No GPS, no phones, just observation, memory, and asking when lost. They learned to read maps, understand schedules, recognize landmarks, and move through the city with purpose and confidence. Public transportation was freedom, access to jobs, friends, opportunities beyond walking distance. Today, most kids don't ride buses alone. Parents drive them everywhere, fearing strangers and traffic. Apps handle routing. Cars eliminate the need for public transit literacy. Modern boys have convenience but lack the navigation skills their grandfathers developed. That spatial awareness, that ability to orient yourself in unfamiliar places, that confidence in moving through the city independently, diminished or absent. 4. How to cook basic meals. In 1975, black boys learned to cook by watching grandmothers and helping in kitchens where "I don't know how" wasn't an acceptable answer. By 12, they could scramble eggs, fry chicken, make rice, and heat up leftovers without burning down the house. Cooking was survival. Mothers worked long hours. Older siblings fed younger ones. Boys who couldn't cook went hungry or ate poorly. So they learned standing on stools to reach the stove, paying attention when elders explained seasoning, memorizing recipes passed down orally. They learned to make something from nothing, how to stretch beans and rice, how to season cheap cuts of meat, how to turn leftovers into new meals. This was resourcefulness born of necessity. Today, many boys reach adulthood, unable to cook beyond microwaving. Fast food is cheap and convenient. Parents don't require kitchen participation. Cooking is seen as optional, not essential. This creates dependency on restaurants, on partners, on pre-made meals. The self-sufficiency that came from knowing you could feed yourself, the pride in making a good meal, the connection to cultural food traditions often missing in boys raised on DoorDash and takeout. 5. How to earn money. In 1975, black boys learned to hustle young. They mowed lawns, shoveled snow, delivered newspapers, washed cars, ran errands for elders, and found creative ways to make money because allowances were rare and wants weren't funded by parents. 10-year-olds knocked on doors offering to rake leaves, negotiating prices, doing quality work so customers called them back. They learned customer service, work ethic, and financial independence before they hit puberty. This taught money management, saving for what you wanted, understanding that work preceded reward, valuing dollars because you'd earned them. Boys learned negotiation, reliability, and the satisfaction of purchasing something with money they'd made themselves. Today, child labor laws restrict what kids can do. Neighborhoods are less trusting of door-to-door services. Parents provide allowances or buy what kids need. Earning opportunities for young boys have shrunk dramatically. Modern boys have more financially, but understand money less. They receive rather than earn, consume rather than save, and reach adulthood without the work ethic that came from hustling at 10 years old. 6. How to fix things. In 1975, black boys learned basic repair skills by necessity. When the screen door broke, you fixed it. When a bike chain came off, you put it back on. When toys stopped working, you took them apart to understand why. Fathers and grandfathers were self-taught fixers who couldn't afford repairmen. Boys watched, helped, and eventually did it themselves, learning to use tools, understanding how things worked, developing problem-solving skills that transferred to everything. They learned that most problems could be solved with observation, patience, and willingness to try. Breaking something further while trying to fix it was part of learning. Adults didn't do everything for them. Today, most boys don't know how to fix basic things. They replace rather than repair, call professionals instead of attempting solutions, grow up believing they can't fix things because they've never been taught to try. This creates learned helplessness, dependence on others for problems they could solve themselves. The confidence that came from fixing what broke, the resourcefulness that came from making do with what you had, the competence that came from understanding how things worked, largely absent. 7. How to read situations and people. In 1975, black boys learned to read rooms, situations, and people instinctively. They watched adult interactions, observed neighborhood dynamics, and learned to sense when tension was rising before violence erupted. They knew which streets to avoid at certain times, which adults to trust, and which to keep at distance. When laughter was real, and when it was covering anger. When to speak, and when silence was safe. This survival skill was taught explicitly. Pay attention to how people move. Listen to what they're not saying. When you feel something's wrong, trust that feeling and get out. Boys developed intuition about danger, reading body language and tone before trouble started. This kept them alive in environments where missing signals meant getting hurt. Today, many boys lack this awareness. They're glued to phones, insulated from street dynamics, raised in safer environments where reading danger isn't daily necessity. This is better in many ways: less trauma, less hypervigilance, more childhood innocence. But it also means some boys can't sense danger until it's too late, can't read social situations, miss cues that would have been obvious to their grandfathers. 8. How to shine shoes and iron clothes. In 1975, black boys learned to shine their own shoes and iron their own clothes by age 8. Sunday mornings meant polishing dress shoes until they reflected light, learning the rhythm of brush strokes and the right amount of polish. Ironing wasn't optional. You learned to press shirts without burning them, create sharp creases in pants, and present yourself properly, because appearance mattered in a world that judged black boys harshly. Grandfathers taught shoe shining as ritual, the circular motions, the buffing technique, the pride in looking sharp even when poor. You might not have much, but you can look like you do. This taught self-presentation and self-respect, taking care of what you owned, understanding that how you looked affected how you were treated. Today, many boys reach adulthood, never having ironed anything. Clothes come wrinkle-free. Shoes are sneakers that don't need polishing. Parents handle laundry and presentation. Modern boys are more casual, but sometimes less polished. The discipline that came from maintaining appearance, the pride in looking sharp, the understanding that presentation mattered, often missing. 9. How to show respect to elders. In 1975, black boys learned explicit codes of respect. You said yes, sir, and no, ma'am to adults. You stood when elders entered rooms. You didn't interrupt grown folks talking. You offered your seat on the bus to older people without being asked. This wasn't optional. Disrespect brought immediate correction from your parents, from the elder you disrespected, from any adult who witnessed it. Boys learned to speak when spoken to show deference through body language and tone, to understand that age commanded respect regardless of how you felt about the individual. This created intergenerational connection. Elders felt valued. Boys learned humility and how to navigate hierarchies. Today, these formal respect codes have relaxed. Kids call adults by first names. Conversations are more equal. Children are encouraged to express opinions freely. This creates more authentic relationships, but sometimes less respect. Some boys talk to adults like peers, miss social cues about appropriate behavior, and lack the humility that came from understanding they didn't know everything. 10. How to keep your word. In 1975, black boys learned that your word was your bond. If you said you'd do something, you did it. If you promised to be somewhere, you showed up. If you borrowed something, you returned it. Fathers taught this harshly. Breaking your word brought consequences that made you remember. All you have is your word. Without that, nobody will trust you. Boys learned reliability because their communities depended on it. When you said you'd mow a lawn Saturday morning, that person planned around you showing up. Flaking meant losing opportunities and reputation. This created accountability, trustworthiness, and understanding that reputation was built through consistent action over time. Today, commitments feel more flexible. Texts replace showing up. Last-minute cancellations are common. RSVP means maybe. Modern boys have more freedom but less accountability. The reliability that came from keeping your word, the reputation built on trustworthiness, the understanding that people remembered whether you did what you said, often weaker in a culture where everything is negotiable and everyone has excuses. Conclusion: these 10 skills weren't just practical abilities. They were a foundation of competence, confidence, and self-reliance that defined what it meant to become a man in black communities in 1975. Boys who learned these skills didn't need constant supervision or intervention. They could handle situations, solve problems, take care of themselves and others. They grew up faster, harder, and more capable because circumstances demanded it. Today, childhood looks different. Boys are safer, more educated, and have opportunities their grandfathers never imagined. This is progress, real, meaningful progress, that shouldn't be dismissed or diminished. But something was also lost. That practical competence, that ability to handle whatever came, that understanding that you could figure things out because you'd been taught how. The best path forward isn't returning to 1975. It's combining the safety and opportunities of today with the self-reliance and practical skills of yesterday. Boys who can change tires and code, who can fight if necessary but prefer words, who can cook, fix things, earn money, read situations and keep their word while also accessing resources their grandfathers never had. That's evolution. That's honoring the past while building something better. Because the goal isn't raising boys like 1975. It's raising boys who have the competence of 1975 with the wisdom of today. Boys who are both capable and cared for, strong and supported, self-reliant and connected. That's the legacy worth building, taking what those boys learned in 1975 that made them strong and adding what we've learned since about making them whole.